30 seconds. Ten seconds. We're live.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this morning for what we hope will be a very fruitful engagement on some key issues that have been of concern for many of us here individually for several weeks and certainly as a group within the last 5 days. My name is Odette Dixon and I'll be marshalling our discussion this morning. We have with us a group of education stakeholders that include principals, teachers, students and parents who have been concerned about the CSEC results for this year. There has been some individual action across the region, and we are very glad that that individual action has now been galvanized into a movement that we hope will lead to dialogue with CSEC and some outcomes that reflect the performance of our students. We will start this morning with Paula Ann Moore from Barbados. She is the coordinator of a group of concerned parents of Barbados, and Mrs. Moore will outline the issues as we see them presently. Thank you. Ms. Moore.
Good morning to the entire Caribbean. It is indeed a profound privilege to be invited to present to all of you. And I am going to proceed to give an overview of introducing who we are, the coalition, and what our objectives are. Let me start with our first slide. One moment. What we are attempting to achieve 12 weeks after the release of the CSEC 2020 CAPE and CSEC results is decisive change, decisive and effective leadership, as demonstrated by the Prime Minister of Barbados, who in the early days indicated that what has happened to the children of the region is not right. And Prime Minister Motley, who was the former head of the CARICOM governments, took the regional strategic leadership direction to cover the review costs of all those seeking reviews in Barbados to ensure that no child would be disadvantaged in the event that they would be unable to afford the review process. So 12 weeks on, we, the coalition, are of the view that enough of the long talk, we need decisive action, and therefore the coalition, Caribbean Coalition of CSEC 2020 Redress, is seeking action and leadership to rectify the situation that has disadvantaged thousands of children throughout the region. So what we are seeking to identify is primarily to get the attention of CSEC, get the attention of the CARICOM leadership, and proceed with rapidity for a prompt redress and resolution so that thousands of these children have the justice that they deserve and that their preliminary grades are reviewed. They're reviewed with transparency, and they get the grades that they deserve. The reality is that we will also proceed during the course of this presentation to bring hard, concrete data from all of the presenters here to demonstrate that we're not making this contribution just out of the blue. We are making this presentation based on data to demonstrate that the current preliminary grades are erroneous. They do not reflect the historical performance of these students. They are against the teacher predicted grades, which have a historical evidence of being highly correlated to the actual final grades that CXCs issued. And it also currently, these grades are contradictory to the students' informed assessment of their performance. These children primarily who have been adversely affected are from the traditional high academic performing centers, and these children who are most adversely affected are predominantly the higher performing students within the Caribbean, thousands of them. And the same way that Bolt would not normally lose a race, the same way that Rihanna would not normally produce an excellent song, these children by now, they are seasoned academic experts, and they know when they have done well. And these grades are not reflective of their ability, their historic performance, or their actual performance. And part of what we are trying to achieve is to educate the public that contrary to what is currently in the media, the cause of these changes is not because of primarily any allegations of teacher misconduct. The primary reason for these grades that are clearly erroneous is CXC's revised exam process and their change in the grading methodology. And regrettably, despite what has been promulgated in the media, that change in methodology adversely affected these high-performing children. There is something called grade compression, which our expert, Dr. Michael Clark, who is a Barbadian national, will further elaborate on. But that grade compression, regrettably, that came out of the revised CXC methodology negatively impacted those children. And in addition to Michael Clark's assessment, no less than Guy Nason, who is a world-renowned education statistician and consultant to the UK education authorities, did an analysis which is on his Twitter feed, and you can see it before you. Grade compression results in high achieving students more likely to receive downgrades. So that is why you're seeing the protests coming from thousands of children throughout the Caribbean. For that particular subset of children have been disadvantaged. You can see the slide again where Dr. Nason further discusses that. And our children are 21st century citizens. And in the words of the late John Lewis, they rose to the challenge, they represented themselves, they got into good trouble, and they protested robustly, COVID protocols permitting. And no less than Sir Hilary endorsed their protests. He has made a recent presentation to students that they must recapture the courageous spirit of the youth who rebelled against slavery. And there is nothing more dangerous than in an evolving society than a passive student body. So therefore you'd have seen throughout the Caribbean, students protesting, demanding justice, not a gift, demanding justice and that they get their grades. And you will see trending on social media throughout the day The students saying what they've said these 12 weeks, fix them grades. We are not going to rest. None of this coalition is going to rest until these grades are resolved. And this is within the context of best practice internationally, where public examining bodies, their core mandate, philosophy, and overarching belief and value, mission statement, mandate is that any education authority has to have the well-being of the children at their forefront of how they deliver their product. And there's a precedent in the UK where they rose similarly to respond to the pandemic crisis. They gave a modification of their exams or their results, GCSEs and CX and A levels. It did not work. They had the testicular fortitude to say that they made an error, and their core presentation is that they made a decision to make a change in the best well-being of the students and to remove stress so those students can move forward. Our students deserve nothing less, and our coalition will not rest until our West Indian students have that sort of response from our education authorities. So there are also implications for 2021, and therefore we need to put this to rest, cut out the long talk, and seek rapid solution-based remedies so that the stress of these children will be mitigated and they can focus on what they have to do to proceed in their academic and other life presentations and objectives. There are myriad challenges which other of our presenters are going to speak to, and we have a serious concern as to the stress levels of these children, and we need to ensure that they're mitigated so that we perform our mandate, which we should as adults, that our children are our focus and that they are looked after in the best interest of the region. We come to this with constructively and in the best interest of CXC. And as a change agent, which we believe we are, we strongly believe that we can identify issues that perhaps those in CXC and elsewhere in the education authorities might be too immersed to actually identify. So we hope that the other elements will see that we come here constructively in the best interests of CXC and the region, because we see that there are clearly signs that all is not well. And if we do not hold strain, stop, and come up with a rapid solution, the reality is that we cannot proceed positively, and there are implications short and long term for the progression and development of us as a region. So without any further ado, I will, before I invite Dr. Clark to speak, I reiterate that the objective of this exercise is that we have rapid executive decisive leadership as exhibited by our Prime Minister, so that this situation will be resolved in the best interest of our children. So with that, I thank you, and I look forward to a fulsome and productive and constructive presentation and further objectives that are in the best interest of our students and our region. I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. I'd now like to invite Dr. Michael Clark, a Barbadian national who now resides in the United States. Dr. Clark is a graduate of Harrison College and also of the University of the West Indies. He studied chemistry at Howard University, in Washington, D.C., where he earned a PhD in physical chemistry. And Dr. Clark serves as an education consultant presently. He has had the opportunity to review the data, and he will now present the case as he sees. Dr. Clark, thank you.
Good morning. I was invited to offer an independent assessment of this situation as I perceive it. I was invited as an educator with an interest in assessment and grading, and as a Caribbean national with a demonstrated interest in advancing education equity, quality, and student achievement in the Caribbean and the wider world. Because this is an education assessment issue, let me go to the Bible of Standards and Assessment. The most recent version is the 2014 edition of Standards for Educational and Psychological Testing, published by the American Education Research Association, of which I'm a member, the American Psychological Association, and the National Council on Measurement in Education. This book will be referred to during my presentation as the Standards. As the issue here is one of testing, I must frame the discussion by clarifying three key aspects of testing, three key concepts that must be understood before this discussion can move forward. These are the concepts of reliability, validity, and fairness. The definitions used will be taken from the standards. Reliability refers to the consistency of scores across replications of a testing procedure, regardless of how this consistency is estimated or reported. That's on page 33 in the standards. What does reliability mean in this context? It means that if Jane Doe had a time machine and could go back and forth in time and prepare for and take different versions of a particular assessment, say the Cape chemistry assessment, then her score on different versions in different years would be essentially the same. Statisticians would say over 95% of the time, the score difference should be less than 2 standard errors of measurement. If the score difference is greater than 2 standard errors of measurement more than 5% of the time, then that difference is said to be statistically significant. Reliability is lost if score differences are statistically significant. Validity. This refers to the degree to which the evidence and theory support interpretations of test scores for proposed use of test, taken from page 11 in the standards. In this context, these scores are used for promotion, college, professional, and higher education matriculation, career and employment entry, scholarship awards, and possibly in other ways that I may not be aware of. Validity is linked to reliability. Over the years, employers and educators have developed and crafted expectations associated with specific grade profiles. Data and evidence of student performances have informed expectations of what it means if a student has a particular grade in a particular discipline. If the scores are not reliable, that is, the scores are not consistent with historic scores, then those expectations are no longer valid. Without score reliability, there cannot be test validity. Fairness. This term is challenging. Let me quote from the standards. The term fairness has no single meaning and is used in different ways in public discourse, taken from page 49 of the standards. Yet, we all have an intuitive understanding of this concept of fairness. Taking the words from a famous phrase used in 1964 by United States Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart in a completely different context, fairness is hard to define, but I know it when I see it. Reliability, validity, and fairness. Let us now bring this home to the current situation. Let us start with what is without question. CXC made two significant changes. Change one, CXC changed its test administration protocol. Instead of 3 papers, paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3, CXC decided to base its assessment on only 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 3. This changed its test composition protocol, the effective weights and contributing factors of its assessment, and the structure of its grade award protocol. Dr. Juliet Melville has written a precise and concise analysis where she clearly points out the fallacy behind CXC insisting that the weight of various papers in the determination of the final grade remain the same. Clearly, the weight of paper 2 went from whatever it was to 0. So no further discussion is required on that point. Thank you, Dr. Melville. Change 2. CXC changed the grading protocol for paper 3. The moderation process was extended from a random sample selection as in the past to the moderation of all centers and subjects. This change revealed several uncertainties exist in school communities about subject profiles and SBA moderation. All those are quotes taken from page 3 in the executive summary. I must say that I take issue with the next sentence in the executive summary. That sentence says, the committee is of the view that the requirement to moderate all paper 3s from all schools and for all subjects serve to increase the thoroughness and improve the reliability of the process in 2020 compared to previous years. What is the basis for my position? Page 1 of the executive summary states the report from the Technical Advisory Committee, TAC for short, indicated that student scores from the expanded moderation process were generally lower than in previous years. This strongly indicates a lack of the historic consistency that is the hallmark of reliability. I would agree that the extended moderation process increased thoroughness. I would even agree that it may have improved precision and accuracy in grading. What it did not do was to improve reliability. Clearly, since the TAC indicated that student scores from the extended moderation process were generally lower than in previous years, again, page 1 of the IRT report, these scores would no longer be reliable from a historical context. They were not consistent with previous iterations of the testing protocol. Hence, the results of the extended moderation process are not, by definition, reliable. Without reliability, there is no validity. Assumptions made about the interpretation and meaning of assessment scores lose their meaning if those scores are not consistent, if those scores are not reliable. Allow me to reiterate what I have said so far. The report of the independent review team clearly indicates the results were neither reliable nor valid. Were the results fair? The concept of fairness is complicated and is linked to educational philosophy. There is a philosophy of holding students harmless for events and activities over which they have no responsibility. Many jurisdictions adopted this philosophy in the wake of this pandemic. Mrs. Mordaunt, in her remarks, indicated some jurisdictions that articulated this philosophy. Many of the jurisdictions with which I work have also adopted this philosophy. It is not clear what philosophy CXC has adopted. However, once the Technical Advisory Committee had reported that the expanded moderation process resulted in lowering students' grades, this should have been addressed. Students should have been held harmless to the consequences of the pandemic and the consequences of a sudden change in the moderation protocol. There is another thing I find very concerning. In the closing paragraphs of the executive summary, it was indicated that a simulation exercise with and without paper 2, using data from previous years, highlighted limitations in the model, namely shifting in distribution of grades, reduction in grades 1 to 4. It is clear that the exclusion of paper 2 had a deleterious effect on those students who would have excelled in that paper. A possible effect of changing a potential grade of 1, the highest possible grade, to a 4, the lowest possible grade. This phenomenon is well known. It is referred to as grade compression. In paper 2, the written or long answer paper, students are required to demonstrate their reasoning. Therefore, students who have a deep understanding of the tested construct, but are lured by good distractors on the multiple choice, have a chance to demonstrate their knowledge in this paper and improve their overall scores. Conversely, students without a deep understanding of the tested construct, but who were lucky in their choices on the multiple choice assessment, will see their scores eroded here. It is for this reason that in the US, the College Board used only the paper 2 equivalent for their AP test this year. So to clarify, without the paper 2, the long answer paper, there is the potential for strong distractors to depress the scores of students with a deep understanding of the tested construct, and for luck to enhance the scores of students without a deep understanding of the tested construct. The possibility of going from a grade 1 to a grade 4 by excluding paper 2. Grade compression referenced by Professor Guy Philip Nason is something that must be examined very closely. When the potential for grade compression by elimination of paper 2 is compounded by a change protocol, extended monitoring, that results in students earning lower grades in one of the 2 remaining papers that are used for determination of grade awards, I cannot accept that this process was fair. In conclusion, the independent review team report indicates that the resulting scores based on the change in assessment structure and grading were neither reliable, valid, nor fair. And as such, major redress is required. The most reasonable redress would be to regrade paper 3 in a manner consistent with the historic grading to recapture what reliability of scores there might be. This will not address all ills, but it is something that is doable. An additional option would be to offer any students who are willing the opportunity to take a paper 2. If students can demonstrate a deep understanding of the tested construct, it would be unconscionable to allow an error in assessment to derail their academic progression. In all this, students should be held harmless. Therefore, those students who are happy with their grades should get to keep those grades. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark, for that very insightful presentation. We'll have an opportunity to direct questions to Dr. Clark later on in this press conference. I would like to acknowledge the people across the region who have joined on YouTube. There have been several questions about if this press conference is being recorded. It will be available on YouTube, and we will also circulate the documents being presented by each person during this conference to the media. Thank you again for joining. I would now like to direct our attention to Grace Baston, who will be one of 3 principals who will be presenting case studies. I think one of the issues that has arisen from this is the concern that this is anecdotal. It's not a pervasive issue across the region. So we've invited 3 principals, starting with Grace Baston, principal of Campion College.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to everyone who has tuned into this press conference. My job, very briefly this morning, is to present the case of Campion College, and I want to go right away to that slide presentation I've prepared. Right. So, to begin with, what is Campion College? What is this school? We are a 60-year-old secondary school. We're owned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Kingston, but we're a granted school. We're operated in collaboration with the government of Jamaica. We are consistently ranked among the top schools in Jamaica. And of note, Campion has, since 2003, won the award from the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, JAPS, for the top performing school in CSEC. And from 2005, which is the year Campion started doing the CAPE, we have won the award for the top performing school at CAPE every year. And we are the school consistently producing the most students on the CXC's regional merit list for both CSEC and CAPE. I say this to give context. What Mrs. Moore described as something affecting high-performing schools, I wanted to establish that Campion falls into that category. So what is our concern? The inexplicable decline in the quality of our passes this year. So like many high-performing schools, we are not so focused on overall pass rates. Did we get 100% pass? Or we expect to get that. For the last 15, 20 years, our school has been laser focused on improving the quality of our passes. And we measure that by the percentage of our passes that are grade 1, both the CXC and the CSEC and the CAPE levels. And the reason this decline, any school can have a bad year. That is normal. Any school can have a year of disappointing results. We get them all the time in different subjects. The problem is the decline in the quality of the passes in this year. And this year, why? Because we know, particularly in the sciences, that our students entered the exam with strong SBA scores. Now, remember, in the sciences, those SBAs were moderated on-site by agents of the CXC. These were not SBAs that were uploaded and moderated by CXC. These were done on-site by people trained by CXC, and they confirmed our teachers' scores, and they were signed off on by, myself, principal of Campion, and in other schools, principals. And the third thing about this year is that second component of the exam, the multiple choice paper, the paper 1, we know, widely known, they consisted of mostly repeated items, multiple choice items that were widely accessible in the region, extensively practiced by students. And the reports of all our students was that they found the multiple choice papers very, very easy. And with those 3 facts then, states of affairs, we are baffled as to the decline in the quality of our passes. So just to give you a sense of trend for Campion, these are raw scores for CSEC results over the last 5 years, from 2016 to 2020. And focus particularly on the grade 1 passes, you will see that in 2020, we have a dramatic decline in the number of our passes that are grade 1s. And then a corresponding increase in the 3s, 4s, 5s, and an ungraded. Those numbers are unknown to us. You can see the difference in the trend, very dramatic. And the CAPE results at the CAPE level, even more striking, where our ones would normally be nothing less than, I'm sorry, we're still looking at raw scores. And you can see, again, the dramatic increase in the number of ones, decrease rather, and the increase in 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s. Just statistically not in line with what we're accustomed to. Now, we wanted to look very quickly at the correlation, the agreement between our teacher predicted and actual grades. These tables attempt to show that. So we have here from 2017 to 2020, you can see, this is the CSEC level. When you look at the total, the percentage of grades predicted to be grade 1 by our teachers, you see that in 2017, it was exactly what our students achieved. In 2018, our students outperformed the predictions. The same in 2019, our students outperformed the predictions. I make the point here that our teachers are not in the habit of padding their predictions, of over predicting student performance, where what you're noticing is that in fact, the actual performance, if not being in line and in agreement with it, it's higher. So there is this broad agreement between teacher predicted grades and actual grades. And notice in 2020, the stark difference, very, very stark. All of a sudden, the predictions are for CSEC are completely off, with that drop to 68. And CAPE, again, even more dramatic. You will see that apart from 2018, where our actual performance was off by about 7 percentage points, generally we perform better, or there is a general agreement. Notice in 2020, a huge decline, a huge difference between what our teachers predicted for grade 1 passes and actually what our students attained. Now, I want to just briefly give you 2 case studies. Two teachers. One, a teacher of CAPE biology. This is a teacher on staff at Campion for 30 years. And what we've done is grouped the times she's taught Unit 2 and Unit 1. You know, we just want to make sure that we're comparing apples with apples. So notice from 2015, 2019, she's taught Unit 2, delivered Unit 2 3 times. Notice this is a very, very conservative teacher in her predictions. Consistently, her students outperform her predictions, except for 2020, where all of a sudden she has this dramatic decrease in the percentage grade 1s attained by her students, and her prediction is completely off, lower. Something that has never happened in her 30 years teaching at Campion. Again, teacher case study number 2. This is a teacher of computer science, another very conservative predictor. You will see, for example, in 2017, he said only 60% of his students would get grade 1, when in fact 85 did. He comes now to 2020, and with his moderate predictions, he says 66% of my students will get grade 1s, and we have this unbelievable 32% of his students attaining grade 1s, and you see 27 of his students attaining grade 4, and 3 of them are 5. Absolutely unheard of in the history of our performance in this subject, and students taught by this teacher. So I want also to mention very briefly 2 students. We have an outstanding student of pure mathematics, Unit 1. We had his module tests, which are the SBAs, the IAs for pure mathematics, independently marked and verified by 2 lecturers in mathematics. They examined the teacher's mark scheme as well as the tests, and verified that his IA score was 51 out of 60. His teacher predicted him to get a grade 1. His grade was a grade 3. We queried it. The query has come back that his grade stands at grade 3. In the second case, the student of CAPE Chemistry, Unit 2, an outstanding student. He was 1st in Jamaica and 4th in the region in Unit 1 in chemistry. As a matter of fact, he placed in all of his subjects that he did that year, all his Unit 1 subjects. He's currently enrolled at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His IA score was a perfect 48 out of 48. He was predicted to get a grade 1. He got a grade 2. Again, we queried this result. It has come back unchanged. So what I want to point to, which is something the professor referred to earlier, I'm not a statistician, but as I read the report of the independent review team, I'm very grateful for the work of the team, but I believe that the report points to areas of concern that may explain the anomalies that I have mentioned above. So for example, the report speaks about the slight skewness in the distribution of the scores. It admits that crucial information on how cut points were established was not available. It says the use of the statistical procedure for the grading process could have resulted in some degree of misclassification of profile scores grades. Now that is deeply concerning to me. It could have resulted in a degree of misclassification. So then how did we proceed with it? Or what did we do to mitigate that? Then the results of using the model produces some degree of intergrade shifting in the distribution of grades for some subjects. Again, what did we do to fix that? And at the technical level, the limitations of the grading model resulted in less than expected performance in some subjects at both CAPE and CSEC levels. To me, embedded in the report of the IRT are these very, 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 very concerning issues. So to close, as principal of Campion College, I am very conscious that these anomalies are not general across Jamaica. This is not a problem that most secondary schools in Jamaica have. In fact, many of our schools, most of our schools report improvement in performance. And as a member of the education community in Jamaica, I am very happy about that. I celebrate that improvement. But I maintain that the underperformance of some of the country's strongest students, and my school is not alone, leads us to wonder if there has been some form of unintentional grade compression. Myself, not a mathematician, I can only say we suspect that, which has adversely affected some high-performing students in Jamaica and across the region. We therefore call upon the CXC to make public the process by which these grades were assigned in 2020. I know the review report, the review team reports has a whole section on the grading, but we find it raises more questions than the answers it gives. It is incomplete, and we're asking for a clear and transparent account, especially of how those grade boundaries were set. And where it is shown that students were put at a disadvantage, we're insisting that the council immediately rectify this situation in favor of the candidates. And I am very grateful for the response of the CXC registrar, Mr. Wesley, and his team to the request of some Jamaican principals with whom he recently met, and with the highest representation from our Ministry of Education, where he agreed to look more closely at some of the most striking anomalies that I've mentioned. And we have sent that information to him. We believe he is going to act on that. But it is my hope that this offer will be extended to all centers across the region where students may have been similarly negatively affected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Baston. Again, participants may direct their questions at the end of the session. I'd now like to invite Reverend Father Gregory Augustine, who is principal of Fatima College in Trinidad and Tobago, to present the case study on the performance at his school. Father Augustine. Unmute, please.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Like Mrs. Bastion, we are and I'm representing here both my school, which is Fatima College, and St. Mary's College. We are Roman Catholic boys' schools run by the Spiritans, it's a religious order of men, and we have been involved in the business of education in Trinidad since 1863. St. Mary's College is 157 years old. Fatima College is 75 years old. We are very aware that, as Mrs. Bastian stated, the overall results of 2020 are better. And we share in the joy of many institutions. The concern is, as has been stated over and over, the anomalies. And though it may constitute a very small percentage of students throughout the region, what is important, I think, is the fact that these are the top performers of the region. These are the hopes and the dreams and aspirations of the region's top students. And that has to be looked at, that has to be taken into consideration. We can't simply turn a blind eye and say, well, these are boys and girls, young men and women who are accustomed to doing well and therefore, well, they just had a bad year. It's not that. We are also still hopeful. We have not lost hope. We do believe that CXC will do right by all of us. We saw the moves made by CXC, and we still hope that the efforts like this will yield positive results. Let me give some examples, and I'll quote some subjects here. In the case of Applied Math Unit 1, in 2018, 57% of our students got ones. In 2019, 64% of them got ones. In 2020, 45%. In the case of communication studies, and by the way, I'm sure other institutions throughout the region share our concern about communication studies. In recent years, I'm speaking about 5 years or so, we have been having problems with the communication studies. So in the case of the year 2018, only 13% of our students got ones. In the case of last year, 18%, and then this year, 0. No one got ones. Computer science, 2018, 40%, 2019, 50%, 2020, 14%. Computer science unit 2, the same. Last year, 65%, this year, 0. Economics unit 2. Last year, 45%, this year, 20%. Pure Math, Unit 2. Last year, 50%. This year, 19%. So we are seeing this dramatic decline in the number of students, the percentage of students getting ones, just as Mrs. Bastian stated there. And that is our concern. These anomalies really, and of course, as she also stated, these subjects have been moderated. They are being taught by teachers with tremendous experience. They projected grades, and that is why we're looking at this and saying, well, look, something has gone wrong, something has gone awry here. And hence the reason for our joining in this effort. I have not received the results from St. Mary's College. The principal had promised. I'm sorry that we were not able to present this, but it is a similar situation. So I speak on behalf of both institutions with this breadth of experience in education in the region. And I join with my colleagues throughout the region in expressing our grave concern for the well-being, not merely for our institution, but for the young minds of our nation and the nations in our part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Father Gregory Augustine. I'd now like to invite Salome Tillett, who is the principal of St. Catherine Academy in Belize, to present the story of her students' performance in the 2020 exams. Ms. Tillett? Please unmute.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I needed a host to unmute me. Thank you. Good morning. I am Salome Tillett from St. Catherine Academy in Belize, and welcome to my colleagues. Thank you for joining us for this press conference. I want to share the story of my school. I'll be very brief. My colleagues have covered a lot of what we have in common, and so I hope that all the concerns and questions that you may have will be addressed during the course of our presentation. My school is St. Catherine Academy. Okay. Who we are a Mercy Center of Excellence and Innovation since 1883, another old Catholic school. We are owned by the Sisters of Mercy, and we are members of the Mercy Education System of Americas, which also has schools in Jamaica. Our mission is to educate women who will live by gospel values and become adults capable of committing themselves to the service of humanity in all the various ways that we do that. Our enrollment is approximately 675 young women, and academic excellence, and particularly for us, marked by CSEC, is a hallmark of our school. And SCA, we are very proud to say, has produced many of the women who have shattered the glass ceiling in Belize. And this is in areas like technology, business, aviation, banking, medicine, politics, education, and research, just to name a few. If we look at CSEC, and we look at the last 4 years, St. Catherine Academy has earned first place in the country in various subjects that you have seen here. So some years we've had more. In 2017, we placed first in 11 subjects. In other years, we have placed in less subjects, but consistently, we have been a top performer in CXC in the country of Belize. We've never ranked less than third in, as far as I can tell. And I just want to go back and point here to add math. If you notice, we have additional math here. We have topped the country for 3 consecutive years here, and we have the same teacher on our faculty at this time. And I will come back to the reason why I mentioned that. If you look at our 5-year trend pass rate in select subjects, and the only reason I did this, I didn't want to have too many slides. We have, you can see the consistency in excellence. You see the consistent high performance, and then you see the significant dip in 2020. So you see that in chemistry, you see that in human and social biology, in physics, in geography. You go down the line. Caribbean history, economics, and we go down, and I didn't add the slide here, but also in math, where we only had 8% pass this year. One student was successful and the other 11 failed. And this is from a tradition of doing the best in country in CXC with the same teacher. If you look at the estimated grades, versus actual grade, and I just selected the sciences for us to focus on, you will see that in biology, for example, the teacher estimated 34 would get 1s, 13 students would get 2s, 1 student would get 3, no student would get 4. When you look at the actual results, 11, not 34, got 1, 17, not 13, got 2s, and 18 students got a grade 3, and we also had a grade 4. If you look at chemistry, where the teacher estimated 26 students to get 1, only 6 got 1. Teacher estimated 12 would get 2s, 10 got 2s. She estimated 3 would get 3, 14 got 3s. And where we did not expect any of our students to fail, we had 11 students getting a grade 4. And I didn't add 5 or 6 because we had no one in those categories. And then the trend continues. You see the same here. You see in physics, where the teacher, very ambitious, knows his students, work hard with them, expected all his students to do well. And instead you see the cluster in grades 3 and grade 4, as opposed to an expectation of excellence that the teacher hosted. As a result of all of the marks we got for 2020, SCA queried the results in 7 whole subjects. We were not satisfied. We saw glaring differences between predicted grade and actual grade, and we know that our students went in with great, I would want to say excellent SBA grades. We saw a notable decline in the number of grade 1s, even where there was consistency in pass. For example, math had 74% pass last year, 74% pass this year, but a notable decline in the number of 1s. We also saw a notable and unexpected decline in the percentage of students that got grades 1 to 3. So we had students in some subjects having a grade 4, a grade 5, which we have never had to deal with. We queried 7 subjects. We said, these do not look like our results. We queried math, additional math, chemistry, physics, social studies, Caribbean history, and economics. We asked for the review on behalf of the school for the entire subject. What have we heard from CXC? To date, nothing. We have not had a response on our subject queries. I can tell you that the students who queried individually, for example, an accounting student queried her grade, grade came back, no change. We had 4 students that queried grades, and they all have come back with no change. In Belize, we also have the special case of the lack of results for Spanish. Our students sat this exam in June, July, like everyone else. The grades were released to all of us. Same date as everyone else. On December 8th, that is 2 days ago, we learned that the scripts for Spanish for Belize had been lost in shipping. That they were recently found, thank God, and that they are now being marked. But we have not heard anything from CXC. The schools and the candidates have yet to hear directly from CXC. We could understand something like that. They could let us know why they plow the communication is the question I have here. So I invite us to pause and reflect for a moment. Are the students at the heart of what we do? And I'm saying we as CXC. And if they are, then how can we, in good conscience, still be deciding what we will do at this point? The exam is the result of 3 years. In the case of Belize, 2 years of preparation. We are months away from the exam. We are still deciding how many papers will be a part of the exam. We are still deciding when the exam will be. What does that do to the student? If we were students, how would we be preparing? How would we be signing up? Sign up is in a few days. Our deadline is next week. How do we sign up for exams when we are still uncertain what papers we will sit, when the exams will be done, if there will be modification to the syllabus, which are all conversations still happening now? Are the students at the heart of what we are doing? The next question I ask you to reflect for a moment on: do all the children of the Caribbean belong to all of us? Yes? If yes, then why are some students being disenfranchised? The student that didn't have access to a computer for months, the student who has been getting a paper package to take home with little or no support for instruction, the student who does not have access to technology, does that student belong to us? Is that our child, or is that a stepchild, as we would say in Spanish? Is that one a stepchild? If the children all belong to all of us, then our exam should be for all of them, not for the ones who can do it. My students can do it, but can all students do it? And do all of them belong to us? Reflect. What value do we place on the teachers who have been working so hard with their own personal challenges, pushing steadfastly and consistently, trying to get the students where they are supposed to be, despite the limitations, despite the challenges that the students bring from home? At what point can we say we can ask more of our teachers? Can you ask more of your teacher? Hasn't your teacher in your system been working hard enough? How does that student prepare for success with all the constraints that we have? If our students fail, the students fail, the ministries fail, the exam has failed. The success belongs to all levels. And likewise, the difficulties and the challenges should be shared by all of us. We have to come to a common place of recognizing that. We reflect. Is it fair that the grades that will follow these students for their lifetime? Think about it. In 5 years' time, hopefully, the pandemic will not be in our face, but the grade will still be there. There will be nothing that say, this was your grade as a result of the difficulty of that moment. So should the students have their opportunities for the rest of their lifetime negatively affected by situations beyond their control, as we heard earlier in the presentation? Reliability, validity, fairness, all lacking elements of the exam. So do these results reflect the candidate's ability? Is the exam worth the risk to our lives? COVID-19 is real. Yesterday, Belize had a daily result. We noted that 506 new persons were infected, or at least that's what the statistics said. Doesn't count those people that didn't go to be tested. 506 more cases as in one day. 4 more people died in one day. We are quickly approaching 200 persons who have succumbed to the pandemic. Where is the pandemic? It's among us, our teachers, our students, our families, our homes. We are saying to these people, despite that, you need to do this because this exam has more value than everything else. Is that fair? Are our students at the heart of it? When we look at the local currency of CSEC, here in Belize, CSEC is not a requirement for any of the junior colleges in Belize. Less than 50% of the junior colleges, in fact, I only noted 4 of the 11 junior colleges preparing students for CAPE in Belize. It is not a mandatory entry requirement for public service jobs. This year, continuing the trend that I have experienced, less than 50% of St. Catherine Academy's cohort have signed up to sit CXC exams. Parents are feeling, I prefer not to do it than to put my child through additional stress. There is a financial cost. Prior to 2020, I guess things were better. Students got a tuition grant. And as of this year, what I saw proposed was less. And I believe government is trying to help the students to access sixth form and junior colleges by giving a grant in what we can afford. But really, this is the local currency of CXC. And that is food for thought. And finally, I want to say that we should allow the 2020 candidates to keep the predictive grades based on empirical data gathered over the 2 or 3 years of preparation at the schools. We have to trust our educators. They predicted what their students would do based on the work that they have done with the students. Would that be so earth-shatteringly wrong? That's an option we certainly can consider, and we ask CXC to consider. We, as a Caribbean people, want to rebuild our faith in CXC. We want to know that we can take pride in this exam that belongs to all of us. It used to be one of those things that made us happy, that brought us together, that was a treasure in the friendships. It was a catalyst, I should say, in the friendships among Caribbean educators. We took pride in it. I think if you went across the region, from what I have gathered, that is not the sentiment. People are angry, people are hurt, people are disappointed in CXC. We want to rekindle our pride in ownership, in what can be a jewel for the Caribbean. And we want to work. We are prepared to do a part of it, to restore our confidence that the success of all the Caribbean students is the reason for this exam. Not some, but all of them. With that, I say thank you, stay safe.
Thank you, Principal Tillett, for your very profound presentation. I'm sure that we have over 400 people who have joined us in Zoom and on YouTube. I'm sure they share my sentiment that we appreciate the work that you do, that all the principals do and the teachers do. And everything that you have said is certainly quite moving. And we hope by the fact that we have so many people here that we can create this into a movement for the improvement of CXC, because we want to make clear that that is the mission of the group. With that, I'd like to invite from Guyana, Michelle Fraser, who is the president of the PTA at Queen's College, to give us a parent's perspective. Ms. Fraser?
Good morning, everyone, Madam Chairperson, and everyone from across the region. Are you hearing me? Before I start, I have to say that Ms. Tillett has encapsulated everything that I think anyone listening to this or anyone who has any knowledge of what the children have gone through, I think she's encapsulated it in a wonderful way. But unfortunately, I have been charged by the Guyanese section to bring to you their feelings. I'm here both as a parent, oh, excuse me. I'm here both as a parent and as a spokesperson for the many affected students at Queen's College. Queen's College is a public school which for over a century has been known for producing students of academic excellence. I will not go through the events which led us to being here today, but I will lay out for you the issues which have descended upon our students due to the recent actions of CSEC. These students have been groomed to work hard, strive for excellence, and never give up. When faced with the restrictions of COVID, these young people adapted very quickly to the new format of classes and continued to do what they do best, work hard. This was to no avail for some of them, and these are the students for whom I speak today. Having received the results dispatched on September 22nd, the devastation which hit these young people could only be equated with being upended by a tidal wave which knocked them over with grades 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, and even 7s. Who knew that there was a grade 7 at CSEC? After receiving these grades, the students went through a roller coaster of emotions, going from crying and being outraged at CSEC to becoming hopeful at the prospect of reviews, to once again being crushed when these reviews yielded no changes. It is extremely disheartening that feelings of emptiness, depression, distrust, and self-doubt are often the only things students can rely on to remain constant through everything that CSEC has put them through. In fact, this year, Queen's College has lost an unprecedented amount of grade 11 students to schools which offer Cambridge A levels due to the actions of CSEC. While in 2019, there was 100 students enrolled in the CAPE program, with at least 70% of the returning students being Queen's College students. This year, there are only 87 students in the lower sixth year, with a paltry 22% being returning Queen's College students. That is a decrease of 71%. It is upsetting, but totally understandable that parents and students would feel the need to not only give up their free places at Queen's College, but to switch to schools which have exorbitant tuition fees just to avoid sitting CSEC's exam in 2021. Looking at the affected grade 12 and 13 students this year, we can see that these students were faced with many problems with the internal assessment component of the examination. For those who have been left with no choice but to resit their exams, the 2020 IAs will not be beneficial to them, as CSEC describes these IAs as weak, and thus the IAs will only serve to cause them more damage than good. Students will therefore be forced to take the burdensome task of redoing their IAs. Further, stemming from the grade 12 students, stemming from the poor grades that many grade 12 students received from CAPE, many of them were not allowed to advance to complete upper sixth, and thus were made to leave school prematurely and seek education elsewhere. Even more damaging than that, a lot of students at the grade 12, grade 13 level have had to take a gap year simply because their grades are no longer viable to get them into the universities they strive for. Additionally, grade 13 students who previously would have received scholarships for universities have now lost those scholarships undeservingly as a result of the grades they received from CXC. In terms of the present state of the remaining students at Queen's College, it would be criminal for me to ignore the lack of impetus or direction, which has seemed to pervade many classes. Many students have been reported to be merely going through the paces, going through the motions, and dreading the notion of preparing for an exam in 2021 for which they have no confidence will reflect their effort and capability. Almost every day, I receive questions concerning CXC's approach to these examinations, for which I have no adequate or reassuring answers. What was the grading procedure? Why wouldn't CXC reveal the raw scores for the paper 1 and the moderated IA? What were the cutoff points for the various grades? Why can't teacher predicted grades be used if the system is flawed? How could the blame be placed on teachers who are all very qualified, CXC markers, CXC table leaders, and the very persons who up to the previous year had helped secure awards for CXC from CXC for the students and the school? Why has CXC not given any leeway for the fact that life is not normal? We are in a pandemic and nothing is as it should be. Why wouldn't CXC admit that something had gone wrong and seek to rectify the fact? It is truly a shame that almost 3 months after grades were released, I am no closer to being able to comfort or provide relief to students who were robbed of their rightful grades. It is at this point that I would like to stress the fact that casting blame on the teachers in ruining IAs is nothing but an act of deflection. And we, the PTA of Queen's College, stands behind them as we continue through this debacle. In closing, I'd like to remind you that our children are not asking for anything that does not belong to them. They're simply demanding the grades for which they worked and not the ones that have been skewed by the CXC machinery. Thank you very much on behalf of the students and the parents of Queen's College.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fraser. Because we believe in presenting the story of these exams from every perspective, we've invited 2 students to talk about their experience. We will first have Khalil Kothwala, who is the head boy of Queen's College in Barbados, to be followed immediately after by Adela Scotland, an upper 6th form student at St. Francois Girls College. Khalil?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Dixon, and thank you to all who have presented before. Every single presenter has done a fantastic job of distilling the issues clearly and really advocating for the best interests of many students, myself and my colleagues. And for that, I think I can speak on behalf of all students and children affected. We are most grateful. And certainly to the many of you who are watching online and are logged on to this Zoom call. Now, many words have been used, I think, to describe this situation. It's been variously called the CXC matter, the CXC saga, an issue, an episode, a concern. But for all of us who have really been involved, intimately involved with the student experience and the experience of teachers and parents, we understand that it is nothing really short of a tragedy. A tragedy, I say, because large swaths of students have received grades, as you have heard over and over, that do not match their actual performance and do not match the historical performance of those students and of those schools. A tragedy because every step of the way when it might have been possible to ameliorate the situation, it has been exacerbated. So that we have the independent review team, which did a fantastic job once again of distilling the issues, as Dr. Clark and Ms. Baston alluded to, and highlighted several areas of serious concern, which were not addressed at the time and have not been addressed subsequently. We have the review process now, which, as you heard a few moments ago, Queen's College, Guyana, 3 reviews have been returned with changes. That story is replicated across schools in the entire region, with a very minute percentage of requests for reviews being returned with any substantial change. This clearly demonstrates that the review process was fatally flawed from the outset, and is not going to be the vehicle that we need to rectify this present situation. And finally, a tragedy because it has resulted in substantial material damage. And what do I mean when I say that it has resulted in substantial material damage? In the first instance, a few moments ago, Ms. Fraser from Guyana spoke to the fact that we have students who have matriculated into university. Some have been removed from universities where they would have been accepted conditionally based on the strength of their Unit 1 results. So some of those students have been removed. Others who had the fortune of receiving an academic merit-based scholarship, which would have allowed them and helped them to defray some of the costs associated with higher education, have had those scholarships removed, have been allowed to stay, but have had those scholarships taken away from them. And other students have had to switch programs. So we clearly see in a Caribbean region where education is the cornerstone of our historical story, where so much of our social progress has been driven by education, we can see the real tangible effect that, that this present crisis is having on the ability and the access of our present crop of students to access that education, so be that vehicle of social progress. We have students who are now in upper 6 or doing Unit 2 of K, who are wishing now to apply to universities, some of whom have missed the deadlines because of the protracted process and now cannot apply to universities which previously they would have wished to attend. And even where deadlines are still open, they have not yet been able to apply because simply the grades which they have received have not yet been made right. And so they are now going to be entering an application process at the back end, where it is obviously going to be disadvantageous to them. Thirdly, the atmosphere in schools today is palpable with a sense of angst, of anxiety, of apathy, really and truly. Many students view this present situation as if last year we worked so hard and the result of that was this calamity. Then many feel as though that working towards 2021 doesn't make sense. And it is that sort of apathy that we address every single day in schools. It is a sense of uncertainty by teachers who have been much maligned in the present process, some of whom now feel uncertain of their own abilities, although they have been doing a fantastic job for all of these years. So that we have this palpable sense of unease and discontent in schools. And it is that kind of atmosphere that makes teaching and that makes learning all the more difficult. So once again, substantial material damage, not only in the present, but in the future, certainly next year and moving forward. And finally, make no mistake about it, the credibility of the Caribbean Examinations Council is at stake. The CXC is an examinations body, the currency in which they trade really and truly is their credibility. Any university anywhere in the world or anyone else in any corner of the globe can do a simple Google search of CXC and they will pull up reams and reams of information, of news stories, of social media postings, all manner of information related to the present debacle. And all of this really and truly combines to erode confidence in the Caribbean Examinations Council's ability to administer examinations. And that is something that ought to concern all of us, because we are all members of this great Caribbean civilization, of this project of regional integration. And the Caribbean Examinations Council is a fundamental pillar of that integration. If that is weak, then that essentially serves to weaken our entire project. Education, once again, is a significant driver of our social change, so that when that is weakened, then our entire project is weak. And therefore, it is a matter of concern, not only immediately and instantly for the students affected, or the parents, or the teachers, or the schools affected, but certainly for all citizens of the Caribbean. I think it has been made quite clear that we cannot accept what are clearly and conclusively erroneous results. So far, CXC has shirked industry best practice. They have shirked transparency. And that really has led us to this moment. The challenges which surround CXC have existed for some time. But COVID, I think, to quote T.S. Eliot, has forced the moment to its crisis. And therefore, while we find ourselves here, it is important that we don't waste the unique opportunity that this year has presented to us. This coalition has advanced reasonable, equitable, and fair solutions, which can be implemented with some haste to make these students and their parents whole once again. As time continues, the window of opportunity to implement these narrow, so that much time has passed and that much damage has been caused, substantial material damage. But that does not mean that all is lost. And so I think it is important to remember that in spite of all of the heartache and angst that has been caused and all of the financial dislocation and educational dislocation caused, there is still the opportunity. There is still a window of opportunity to be able to make wrong things right, as our Prime Minister often says. So that it requires, I think, all of us to work together. It requires the Caribbean Examinations Council to work in a meaningful way with the important educational stakeholders of teachers, of students, and of parents to bring this problem to an equitable conclusion in the best interest of students, of their parents, of teachers, of schools, of CXC itself, and certainly of our own regional development. And so I ask you, let us not continue to waste this moment. Thank you, Ms. Dixon.
Thank you very much, Khalil. Adela?
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank everyone for being here and taking an interest in the situation that the students of the region are going through. I would like to thank everyone who presented before me. The information was very compelling and informative, and I believe that everything that was said was necessary and needs to be put out into the public, because it is time that this issue is redressed, because it is long overdue. To all who are interested in the well-being of the future citizens of the Caribbean region, during the period of July-August 2020, students across the Caribbean sat for the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate and the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examinations. During a particularly challenging period, with many changes and adjustments to their rigorous and jam-packed schedules, many doing twice the work as classes moved online and required greater ingenuity on the part of the candidates who were preparing for the examinations. After months of hard work and diligent preparation, The grades awarded to many have been utterly deplorable. Firstly, despite the challenges of online school and the longest school term on record, the students this year made the necessary sacrifices to prepare for their exams so that their futures would not be jeopardized. They adapted to the modified format of the examinations, and although it was difficult, we all persevered. This is why we find it difficult to accept that students with high internal assessment marks, who normally perform excellently, failed to secure ones or even passes in more than one of their subjects. This is even stranger in light of the fact that students with lower marks or who usually do not perform well topped subjects and even attained the highest grades in their subjects at schools. Moreover, students within the same IA groups who would have received the same mark received grades so starkly disparate that it is mathematically impossible. Personally, I can say that when I received my grades, I cried more than I ever cried in my entire life, and have since been in the worst depression I've ever experienced. Attending school every day is difficult, as my work last year got me nothing but disappointment. I know that this is the sentiment amongst my colleagues, as daily, large numbers of students, some of whom I don't even know, have reached out to me talking about their depression. I have had to take on the responsibility of comforting suicidal students across the region because they have reached out to me to express their confusion, and this is something I fully understand. But it is an experience that left me feeling even more despondent. It is bizarre to me that despite the evident discrepancies in results, constant complaints, and the protest, that CXC has done nothing to assist the students of the region who are suffering from the terrible bouts of depression. Although I do not mind, and I will continue to support those who have been affected by CXC's inability to own up to the problems that affected the marking exercise this year, it should not be my responsibility. The students of the region are in crisis, and CXC continues to play games with our future, and this angers me. Additionally, several students have lost hard-earned scholarships, been rejected by universities they were previously accepted to, and have lost important opportunities that they have gained. Several of my peers are repeating subjects in 2021, which is unacceptable. We put in the work already and have earned our passes, yet we are denied our hard-earned passes. This is blatant oppression. In addition to the emotional trauma inflicted by CXC, we now have to exhaust ourselves to reduce subjects we have already done. I say exhaust ourselves because the prolonged vacationless school year, which was required because of the changes to the CXC examination schedule, which will be repeated next year, is exhausting. And for students like me who do extra subjects, it is scary. Furthermore, after all the lack of transparency, unprofessionalism, and scandal this year, what certainty do we have that next year will be any better? There is no assurance that a repeat will improve grades. Again, a repeat that is unjustifiable. I cannot accept that CXC is allowed to gamble with our mental health and futures. This is not education, it is emotional abuse. We are asking not for anything impossible. All we are asking for is for CXC to have integrity and do the right thing and fix our grades. The mental health of thousands of students is at stake, and personally, I cannot sleep at night with this knowledge. And if I, a student, cannot rest knowing what my peers have to endure, how can the government, how can CXC? Education is meant to equip the youth in society with the skills needed to become productive members of society in the future. CXC's actions this year have failed to do that. Instead, they have caused unforgivable trauma and continue to be facetious in the face of calls for them to address the mistakes they made this year. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Adela. If anyone thought that this was just an issue of numbers on a page, certainly Khalil and Adela's presentations would give you a fulsome picture of the anguish, but I also think of the hope that this issue will be resolved. I'd like to ask Marianne Redmond, who is the president of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, to join us now to present the issue from the perspective of teachers. Mrs. Redmond?
Thank you, Odette. Good afternoon to all. And I am grateful for this opportunity to provide some insight into what we term among the teaching fraternity as the CSEC fiasco. Now, to understand the extent to which teachers have been negatively affected and traumatized by this year's events, I am going to give a brief outline of the type of relationship that existed between CSEC and teachers in the region previously. Now, you know that CSEC is an examination board established in 1972 under agreement by participating governments in the region. And they were mandated with the task of providing appropriate examinations and awarding certificates and diplomas in that regard. The council is empowered to regulate the conduct of any such examinations and prescribe the qualification requirements of candidates and the fees payable by them. Now, when CSEC was introduced in 1972, it replaced the GCE Cambridge examinations. And this saw Caribbean teachers rallying behind CSEC from its inception. It was idealistically envisioned to be a manifestation of a movement towards Caribbean maturity and unity through the initiation of developmental approaches to education in the region that reflected us, our history as a people, our cultures, towards qualitative development as a people. Initially, there was much cooperation and direct communication between CSEC and Caribbean teachers, and between CSEC and the agents of the teachers in the region, the Caribbean unions. I remember our union, the BSTU, making visits and having discussions with the previous registrar, Ms. Lucy Stewart, and our recommendations and discussions being fruitful insofar as those recommendations were taken on board. Previously, there were many workshops held and attempts to keep the teachers of the region and CSEC itself engaged in a mutually inclusive and respectful manner that worked to the benefit of all involved. With time, there have been changes in the management and management styles of those in the highest positions at CSEC. And it has in more recent times lucidly demonstrated a shift away from its more altruistic underpinnings to be operating like big business. And this has been to the detriment of those who work both at the teaching and learning ends of the CSEC spectrum or continuum, depending on how you choose to view it. Now, on the 26th of March 2020, there was a press conference held by CSEC. And in it, it was detailed the intended changes to the 2020 examinations. Now, hearing that press conference, the BSTU wrote immediately to the Ministry of Education and copied that letter to the Caribbean Union of Teachers outlining our concerns. Now, the concerns that we had We also expressed to other individual teachers' unions in the region, all of whom themselves expressed agreement with the concerns. And as Khalil said, the problems with CXC are not new. They have existed for a long time. They have been made aware to CXC the existence of those problems over time, and very little has been done to address them. Now, in 2020, things have come to a head. Now, some of the concerns that teachers had from the very beginning in relation to what was said at the press conference revolved around the timing of the exam. The fact that, to our mind, CXC was not taking into account the effect of the digital divide that exists in the region, as this relates to the readiness of students who would have been disadvantaged either through a lack of connectivity or a lack of devices. To our mind, CXC was not taking into account the need for training of both teachers and students in the use of the online platform in the teaching learning process. Not taking into consideration the various stages of shutdown across the region and how that was impacting both teachers and students and the volume of work that they were able to cover or not cover, as the case may be. The social impacts of COVID on the society at large, and especially on students, and the need for psychological support for the students. Our concern also revolved around the structure of the exam. The removal of paper 2 that allows students to expand really on the content that they have acquired in the particular subject area and the application of that content. We were concerned too that the removal of paper 2 would compromise the integrity and the validity of the exams and would not accurately test or reflect the acquired knowledge and skills of the students. This too based on the fact, the realistic, pragmatic fact that many students get help that goes beyond their own work with the SBAs. And I'm being diplomatic to say that very often parents play a large part in the children's final SBA product. To that extent, it is not always authentic work. Then you have the fact that many past multiple choice papers, as has been already referenced, were known to be circulated in the region, and that students had had access to these papers. With the knowledge of this, and the fact that CXC constantly reuses multiple choice items, we inquired of the registrar whether the multiple choice papers for the examinations at both levels, CAPE and CSEC, would be changed in structure, that is, in the content of the questions and the length of the exam, to reflect the fact that these two papers now, the SBA and the multiple choice, would be the sole indicator of the child's wide-ranging knowledge and skill in the particular subject area. As teachers, we were shocked to know that there would be no changes made to the existing multiple choice paper, which would have been set long in advance of the prevailing 2020 COVID circumstances, and which was initially intended to be part of a 3-part exam. No amendment at all to the multiple choice paper was considered by CXC, and the determinant of success now for the student would revolve around 45 questions at CAPE and 60 questions at CSEC and the SBA to cover the content, the voluminous content of the CXC syllabi. Weighting of the papers 3 and 1 was also a source of concern for teachers. We asked this question at our meeting, the CUT's meeting with the CXC registrar on the 8th of April and subsequently on the 24th of September. what was the relative weighting of the SPA and the paper 1 with the removal of paper 2? We were never given an answer. At the press conference, it was stated that the weighting of those papers would have been outlined in respective syllabi. Now, the weighting of those papers are outlined in the respective syllabi as parts of a 3-part exam. The relative weighting with removal of paper 2 was never explained to students or teachers, and so both were operated in a vacuum without knowledge of how what they had done would impact a final grade. The above issues created major discomfort, and at the original meeting and in the subsequent press release from the Caribbean Union of Teachers on the 18th of May, the CUT stated its recommendation to CXC of a September start to examinations, given the existing realities in the region, and a reversion in September to the 3-part examination process. That was totally dismissed. Teachers felt that given the realities of the SBA and given the fact that the students had had access to past exam papers, which multiple choice papers, items of which tend to recur, we felt that the students, would do extremely well, and that CXC would seek to redress that in a way that was convenient to them. And this, we feel, has been exactly what has happened. In an effort by CXC to accept no culpability on its part, and the effect of the statements by the registrar and subsequent outcomes of the independent review team, those statements have been to demonize all teachers in the region operating at that level. Those who actually operationalize CXC's syllabi in the preparation of regional students for their exit exams. The statements generally demeaned and belittled the profession by casting aspersions on the professionalism, integrity, honesty, and capability of the region's teachers, who have all been accused of awarding grades to students that do not accurately reflect the effort of the student. It has been suggested that teachers have been inflating the grades of the students on their SBAs, and the registrar's comments further state that CXC has been aware of this happening for a while, but the proof was provided this year since CXC collected and corrected what sometimes is referred to as all the SBAs, and at other times is referred to as a larger number of SBAs. It is still unclear to us, and it is us as teachers, and a source of bother and worry to us as to how many SBAs were actually second marked, and to what extent then did this affect the final outcome of the awarding of grades to those SBAs. What is also unclear to us is who has been correcting the SBAs as assistant markers and examiners for CXC. Because we know that over time, there has been an exodus of teachers who are willing to correct exam papers for CXC, given the pittance that they're paid. With that exodus, and with CXC scrambling to obtain assistant examiners, there has been a change in criteria for persons to correct exam papers as advertised by CXC. Before, persons correcting exams had to be teachers with a definite no less than 2 years experience of teaching the subject at the level to which the teacher was correcting, et cetera, et cetera. That has changed. And now you see that they are asking persons with a familiarity in the subject area and some exposure to the syllabus content. To what extent then does the quality of the persons being hired by CXC reflect the disparity in grades between the original teacher marker and the moderator this year? Another source of concern to us, did CXC adjust the criteria and rubric for the moderation of the SBAs, creating a different marking scheme for the moderators than that outlined in specific syllabi and used by the teachers of the region in the manner to which said teachers have been historically accustomed? Has CXC shifted away from sampling the work of individual teachers' correction techniques to the sampling of a subject across the school and across teachers as a money-saving technique, compromise their ability to detect challenges with particular schools or teachers? Does CXC provide the quality of feedback necessary to the schools where there are demonstrated challenges with CXC SBA samples? And do they provide pertinent recommendations and so offer support where necessary in the form of workshops for individual schools or teachers as identified? If not, then what are the implications for this and their quality assurance checks and balances, especially in the light of a trend that they claim to have identified previously and which has been exaggerated this year? Is CXC requiring too much of students and teachers with SBA requirements across every subject area? The group work and cognate group submissions that they have been recently promoting have no real and practical reduction on the amount of work that teachers and students cover, especially in the sciences where teachers still complete all labs so that they can ensure coverage. Can the final length of the SBAs requested by CXC with effective coverage of relevant outline criteria on the syllabus be effectively achieved by the limitations they set for the students? Is CXC really aware of the work that goes into the supervision, preparation, marking of SBA work by teachers, which they do for free, and on which CXC as a third party assesses teachers' work? Did CXC have the requisite number of teachers to correct the SBAs as required? Because now you're not dealing with samples this year, 2020, you're supposedly dealing with all the SBAs, thousands, tens of thousands of SBAs done across the region. Did they hire enough people to complete the marking exercise? And if they did not, and all papers were not marked by the time of the release of the preliminary results, then what was done to allocate marks to those papers? This is a problem that has not only surfaced this year, there are reports of this having been the case for years now, especially since the introduction of online marking, where persons who mark online have reported that they know that not all papers have been corrected by the proposed date of announcement of results, and yet still results have been announced. Did CXC have the appropriate sufficiency of IT capacity to facilitate the accurate uploading of the students' SBA across the region? There have been discrepancies reported where CXC is claiming that they have received only a front page or a partial SBA when schools have uploaded the total SBAs in their entirety, and they had received no indication from CXC in the form of correspondence indicating that they were not received. Yet CXC in the IRT report is claiming that in some instances, only partial SBAs were received, and that affected the students' grade. In relation to reviews and queries, did all of the above lead to what I understand to be over 10,000 requests for reviews, both at CAPE and CSEC level, and the hundreds of requests for queries? Now, Ms. Tillett, in her excellent presentation, referenced the fact that Spanish in Belize was not corrected until the middle of October. On October the 23rd, we had teachers in our union correcting Spanish paper 2s from Belize, and preliminary examination results had been delivered to students across the region a whole month in advance. That exercise was supposed to be completed on the 28th of October. Why is it that students in Belize, according to Ms. Tillett, have still not received their results in Spanish, CSEC, if I have understood her correctly? Teachers' concerns here revolve around the fact too, that for some time, especially since the introduction of e-marking, the results have been given before the completion of the marking exercise. Teachers' concerns surround teachers also have concerns surrounding this review process that CXC is presently engaged in. We want to know who corrected the reviewed SBAs. We want to know if these are the same teachers who originally corrected the SBAs. And we want to know, if that is the case, what systems were put in place to ensure that any markers did not re-examine or review the same paper that he or she might have originally marked. Teachers were never given the weighting of the exams, the papers 3 and 1, and we still do not understand the algorithm, the graph, the formula used to apportion grades to students. We are still mystified at the allocation of grades where top performing students were ascribed disappointing grades and vice versa. Teachers are concerned about their professional image and the perception created by the statements emanating from CXC in relation to that, and the image that their students now have of them as capable teachers in the system. This has been very traumatic and demotivating for teachers in the region. And I have to also mention the fact that teachers are concerned by reports that some students who had not requested reviews have received amendments to their grades upward. And these students have not even requested reviews. Yet the students who have requested reviews are getting grades that demonstrate no change at all.
Ms. Redmond, we appreciate your presentation and the detail therein. I would just like to give you 1 more minute to wrap up because we had committed to 2 hours.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I will end and say that teachers in the region have done a sterling job in rising to the occasion to ensure that in novel, fluid circumstances and with limited resources, little training, that of both teachers and students across the region, the effort that they put into properly preparing students across this region was a sterling effort. The CXC engaged in a modified process of examination this year with little advance warning to students or teachers alike. There was an immediate response from teachers in the region through their unions to CXC's changes. CXC ignored the changes, the responses, the concerns, and our students in the region have been subjected to what we call a fiasco. And a fiasco too, where CXC has sought to apportion blame to teachers in the region who have worked consistently on their behalf over the years.
Thank you very much, Marian Redmond, who is, as she's the president of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union. We've had a very fulsome and thorough presentation this morning. We are going to open for some questions, but I think I'd like to say two things: that the presentations will be available to the press on request, and also that the hashtag for the students who are participating in the press conference this morning is #FixThemGrades. So at this time, we'd like to open for a few questions, and then we will invite Lindbergh Wright, who is the president of the Jamaica's Association of Principals of Secondary School, to offer closing remarks. So if we have no questions at this time, we can continue the dialogue by email at caribcoexams@gmail.com. I would now like to ask Mr. Wright to offer closing remarks in representing the Regional Coalition for Exam Redress. Mr. Wright?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much for having listened to us. Good afternoon to everyone. Just want to say that CXC is undoubtedly a Caribbean gem. You know, most of us have known CXC for all our lives, and it has been a yardstick of excellence for many generations of Caribbean people. It's a distinctively Caribbean creation. You know, many education stakeholders, including teachers, parents, principals, government officials, are proud of its contribution to the development of the capacity of our human resources. It must be clear that this coalition has no intention to damage or hurt this edifice of pride and excellence that has historically proven to act in the best interest of all Caribbean students. Truth is that such a reputation is at best tenuous, given what has transpired in the grading for 2020 examinations. Today, we represent a cause of fairness to our students and transparency in our marking process that can only make our CXC stronger and our students better served. We are here to ask CXC to preserve its integrity and, most of all, the trust of its clients by understanding that our concerns are real, as the evidence demonstrates that impressionable minds are being impacted adversely. Essentially, we're asking CXC to pay attention and act in the best interest of those it was mandated to serve, our children. Our view is that CXC needs to address the following in an open and transparent manner so that we may move forward with confidence in its processes. It needs to much better account for the inexplicable fall in quality of performance of too many of our outstanding students by releasing in its entirety the mechanism or method used to compute such grades. CXC needs to make known cutoff scores for 2020 in relation to other years so that stakeholders may understand much better how it made allowances to ensure that this year's marking did not disadvantage students already disadvantaged by the onset of a devastating pandemic. And we must note that in the IRT report that not even the team had access to this. CXC has an obligation to explain how its change of format and the methods employed for example, grade compression to address predicted issues may have adversely affected students' final grades and make redress in the interest of our children. In a climate of apprehension and nervousness, CXC's delayed and piecemeal approach to reviews is frustrating, and reviews need to be communicated to schools with clarity and alacrity. The review process, we feel, is punishingly protracted, and it needs to be handled with greater sensitivity to the plight of students awaiting such reviews. CXC needs to clarify for us why in a criteria and reference examination in areas such as the sciences, where the multiple choice marks are admittedly better according to the report just out from CXC, and SBA is moderated and signed off as outstanding by their moderators, we are seeing the quality of grades achieved falling below expectations. CXC needs to account for poor performances with explanations without suggesting in a generalized way that students did poorly on multiple choice exams because they swatted, or that teachers are to be blamed. It cannot be acceptable that most students did better, but among the top performing students, the performances were poor in quality. Such anomalies in performance need to be much better explained and transparently addressed. We wish to underscore that the cases outlined are real and meant to demonstrate the sincerity and urgency of our cause. Real people are being affected, and we think that CXC has the capacity to handle this much better. We expect CXC to. It is imperative that CXC addresses these matters, including those related to openness about its grading processes, as confidence in its integrity as a body is tenuous at best at this point, and this is not a desirable state of affairs. CXC is curiously vague about this process, and this is, we believe, unacceptable, given that it is standard practice to review critical information about how grades are computed, as is the case in reputable and responsive examining bodies worldwide. As we prepare to write examinations in 2021, in what may be worse conditions than we did in 2020, many will be weary of the processes because the matters outlined have not been adequately addressed. In such a crisis, CXC must be committed to transparency and collaboration. We acknowledge that this is a difficult period, but it is not beyond us to work through this crisis in the best interest of our children. Our hope, or demand even, is that for the sake of all stakeholders, CXC must address the issues laid bare today. Our hope is that CXC listens to us as its stakeholders to resolve this threat to its integrity, which is inextricably tied to the faith we have in its work on our behalf. Having presented clear evidence of our concerns, we await the powers that be to make redress. Thank you all. We appreciate your audience and hope that we have presented a clear position of our unequivocal demand for fairness.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And thank you to the over 400 people across the Caribbean who joined us this morning. We thank all the presenters, Dr. Michael Clark, Principals Grace Baxton, Reverend Father Augustine, Principal Simone Tillett, Michelle Fraser, President PTA of Queen's College, Khalil Kothwala, head boy at Queen's College, and Adela Scotland, an upper sixth form student at St. Francois Girls College, Marian Redmond, President of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, Pauline Moore, coordinator of the Group of Concerned Parents of Barbados, and Lindbergh Wright, President of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary School. If anyone ever wanted to know what the Caribbean looks like, I would offer that it looks like us. Thank you, everyone. God bless you and have a good day.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson.